We have a trade to announce. And honestly, when I see this deal go down, when I see the value of the assets being swapped between the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Pittsburgh Penguins, I look and I say, you know what? That's pretty fair. That is decent. I don't think any team got fleeced here. I think both players could probably be happy with how things went down. Because we saw earlier this morning the Columbus Blue Jackets and the Pittsburgh Penguins swap Yegor Chinakhov, Danton Heinen, and a bunch of draft picks. I said earlier this morning, this was an hour ago, Columbus has traded Yegor Chinakhov over to the Pittsburgh Penguins in exchange for forward Danton Heinen, alongside a second and a third round pick. The second is in 2026. The third is in 2027. Let's go over the profile here because Yegor Chinakhov is a guy whom, based off of all the insider information we saw, he's a guy whose trade request was never taken back throughout the course of this season. Chinakhov is 24 years old, 6'1", 203, a left-handed winger, and a guy who was drafted in the 21st overall spot by Columbus in the 2020 NHL Draft. This draft pick was out of nowhere. Nobody was expecting Chinakhov to be taken in the first round back in 2020. Take a look at the 2019 NHL Draft projections. Future considerations had him at 249. McQueen's had him at 49. You had NHL Central Scouting ranking Chinakhov as the 30th overall European skater. This was the year before he was actually drafted, because in Chinakhov's draft-eligible year, 2018-19, he was not taken in the draft. The year after, he was an overager out of the first round, a guy who had 69 points in 56 MHL games, and the Blue Jackets taking him in the first was seen as a total curveball in the grand scheme of the 2020 draft. But they took him because they thought, hey, this guy has a really good shot, he has some untapped potential, nobody is scouting this guy, and we want to take our bets and see if he can actually become a player here. For the most part, the Blue Jackets were right, because over the next little while, you saw Yegor Chinakhov make his way into the KHL, actually have a decent draft plus 2 year, 17 points, 32 games. That's not the craziest stat line in the world, but it's still decent. And then he went over to Columbus and actually played in his first NHL season. He had 14 points in 62 games, 7 goals, 7 assists. The years after, you saw some varying levels of production with some optimism thrown in there too. He was less than half a point a game the season after, 13 points in 30 games, was also over a point per game in the AHL. And then in 23-24, he had scored his career high. 29 points in 53 games played, 16 goals, 13 assists. It was at this time where we started to say, hey, Yegor Chinakhov is really putting it together. This guy can be a legit NHL goal-scoring threat. But then, last season happened. He only had 15 points, but he only had 30 games played. Things didn't really go Chinakhov's way in terms of being available in the lineup, and this season it's been more of the same. 6 points in 29 games played is on pace for about 16 points over 74, which is a much worse stat line compared to the previous years he had. I mean, the guy had 15 points in 30 games last year. He's on pace for 16 points in over double the amount of games this year. He wasn't getting much playing time. There were many sub-10-minute games that Chinakhov had as a member of this Blue Jackets team. The Blue Jackets weren't winning. Chinakhov wasn't scoring. He wasn't doing all too much. He wasn't given an opportunity, so he wanted out, and that was very public. We already saw lots of ammo from NHL insiders saying, hey, this guy and his representation, they want out. So he goes over to Pittsburgh, a team that will likely use him a lot more, and a team that, by all accounts, is looking for some younger roster players. Chinakhov will hopefully be another one of these guys that Pittsburgh brings in to help foster the next generation, and who knows? We always talk about connections. If you wanted to say Chinakhov and Evgeny Malkin can form some sort of a bond there, it would be a nice... Man, I was about to say father-son duo, but no, I think that makes Evgeny Malkin seem a little bit too old. Either way, you kind of get what I'm saying here, right? There can be some camaraderie there shared between Chinakhov and Malkin. Not that there weren't any Russian dudes on Columbus, it's just, we try to make connections where we can. Heading back over to the Blue Jackets, though, you have a second and a third round pick, as well as forward Danton Heinen. Now, that seems about right to me. I think that Danton Heinen is a player whose value has decreased significantly since his days in Anaheim, and after being played in Pittsburgh for a second straight tenure, you think about what Danton Heinen was and what he inevitably became over the course of the past few years. This is a guy who, actually, I was mistaken, his best days were as a Boston Bruin. He was a former 47-point guy for the Bees back in 2017-2018, who inevitably found himself in Anaheim, in Pittsburgh, back in Boston, over to Vancouver, which is where we started to see Danton Heinen's numbers significantly take a hit. He had half the points in fewer games, then got traded back over to Pittsburgh, then in Pittsburgh only had 2 points in 13 games this year, was an AHL guy for the majority of his time, and then he got traded over to Columbus. Now, Heinen is 30 years old. He's making $2.25 million till the end of this season. He is essentially a rental contract. He hasn't been doing all too well, and especially when you consider the fact that he is 6 years older than Chinakhov, I can understand why this trade worked out the way it did. A second and a third for Heinen. As long as Chinakhov goes over to Pittsburgh here, that kind of balances out the value here. Heinen is a player that was dubbed a very nice two-way fit. He's got good versatility when he is at his best. He can score some points, and he can be reliable at all ends. But honestly, in Vancouver just a few years ago, he was more of a nothing player. Yes, he had 36 points in 74 Boston Bruins games the year before, but in Vancouver, he just didn't really do all too much. And that's a shame to say, considering the fact that Danton Heinen, he's from Langley. He's from my part of town, and he played for the Richmond Sockeyes, a team that I was the main commentator for back in 2019-20. So I have a very nice connection with the teams and the story that Danton Heinen was a part of, but unfortunately, when he made his hometown return to Vancouver, that's when his career started to take a little bit of a downturn. He was no longer the 47-point guy that he was with the Boston Bruins back in 2017-18. But with that in mind, he'll be going over to Columbus. If he fills in the Yegor Chinakhov spot, then you're getting some added two-way presence and center versatility there for CBJ. It's not a bad ad by any means, especially when you add on those draft picks, especially for Yegor Chinakhov, who wanted out in the first place. I'd say this is a pretty good deal for both sides. Pittsburgh gets some younger talent that they can foster into something else, and then Danton Heinen will be given a bigger opportunity in Columbus to just provide more of that stability. Not necessarily go out there and be expected to score a bunch of points, but just go out there and do regular two-way forward things. So with that in mind, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I like this trade a lot for both teams and the players involved here. What are your thoughts on Columbus and Pittsburgh swapping Danton Heinen, a second and a third, in exchange for Yegor Chinakhov? I hope you enjoyed this video. And bye.